With the move for case interviewing going almost entirely online in the upcoming year, we have given a lot of thought to how to help people prepare for the virtual interview. The good news is that Management Consulted has been conducting virtual interview practice for 12 years. So we have a lot of things that we've noticed over time, but we compiled these into a list of 7 action items that you can use to prepare effectively for your case interviews. Hi, I'm Jenny Ray, the CEO of Management Consulted, and I'm excited to share with you the tips that we've learned by training over 20,000 people for case interviews in the last 12 years. First of all, number 1, move your computer back on the desk. I'm going to demonstrate what this looks like. In the case interview, you're going to need the computer to be further away from you than is normally comfortable, because you want the paper where you're taking your notes to be in front of you so that someone can have everything in their field of view. Otherwise, you're left with keeping the computer close to you and then writing off to the side, which breaks attention and doesn't give them a sense of what you're doing when. So you want to make sure that the positioning on a desk or on a table is adequate so that there's plenty of space for you to write in front of the camera. It's important because in a virtual environment, somebody can't take cues off of the notes that you're writing, but they can take cues off of when you're writing the notes and what you're writing down. Number 2, it's super beneficial for you to begin the case incredibly strongly by what we call an over recap, which means that instead of just diving right into the problem, making sure that you really adequately recap and ask questions about the recap before clarifying anything. This will ensure that the interviewer knows that you have assimilated all of the information. There seems to be, in a virtual environment, more uncertainty about whether or not you're catching the information. Some of that is just our conditioning that people are usually paying partial attention. So you want to make sure that at the beginning of the case, you're doubling down on that recap and over recapping at the beginning. Then after that comes the structure. In the structure part of the prompt, this is one of the big flaws that we see in the virtual environment. People usually take for granted the fact that they have written down on their paper a clear structure. And when you're prepping for an in-person interview, you could turn that paper around and somebody could see that there's a structure there. Here you have to essentially assume that they can see that you're writing, but they cannot see your structure. They cannot see the definition of your structure, how many buckets you have, or how many data points you have underneath it. So it's really important when you are verbally retelling your structure that you use consistent numbering. So for example, you would say, I have 4 categories. I want to look at customers, I want to look at the competitive advantage, I want to look at channels, and I want to look at risks. In the first category, which is customers, I want to look at 3 data points. The first data point is, so each time you're introducing new information, there is a number that must go with it inside your structure. This is absolutely imperative. If you do it, it comes across as though you are clear and confident. If you don't do it, it comes across as incompetence, regardless of whether or not you have this perfect structure laid off on your paper. Number 4, for your math, a lot of people cheat on the math, and we've been training you not to cheat over time, but in the virtual environment, this is really getting crystallized. Sometimes people can effectively in person watch your thought process, and you're able to mutter a little bit as you're going through parts of the case and math and point something out and zigzag through a problem. In a virtual environment, they have none of those same visual cues. They can't make the read between the lines guess of whether you're tracking or not with the information. You need to lay it out very explicitly. And so our 4 steps for answering a math problem are, first, to give an adequate recap. And the recap must start with the problem and then the data. Then tell them the structure for how you're going to solve that. Explain for them your math game plan. This is one of the key missing pieces when we're training people on math, and it is imperative in a virtual environment. And then finally, you want to make sure that as you're solving the case, you're talking through each one of the mechanical steps so that there's no questions or leaps, and especially in a situation where you may have a miscalculation, somebody can follow very directly exactly what you did. Finally, and most important of the math, is the insight, where many people would waffle a little bit in the insight. You need certainty in a virtual environment. So instead of saying, well, we could do this or we could do that, there are 3 things that this tells us: number 1, number 2, and number 3. So again, reincorporating that numbered structure for the 4th part of math in the insight. Number 5, for the creative questions, you need to write and narrate at the same time and use the same over-structuring, over-numbering that you did in the structure at the beginning of the case. So, for example, if instead of saying, oh, here's some ideas I have, we could use video, we could partner with influencers, we could use Facebook, right, kind of are just riffing off of your ideas, you would say, okay, here's one idea. We could use video influencers. That's number 1. You number it. And then you come back and you say, let me explain that a little bit. And then you walk through when you're going to explain it. And then you say, good, idea number 2. And you very clearly number your creative ideas as you're going through them. And you also keep a written record so that they visually in the camera can see that that's happening. Number 6, for the closing, you need, again, clarity and definition. You need to pick an answer. The worst answer that you could give in most case interviews is, we don't have enough data to give an answer. That's the kind of answer that in real consulting life, if you give that answer to a client, they fire you. So you can't come up with that at the end of the case. What you're looking for in the virtual environment is a little bit more confidence, a little bit more clarity when you're coming up with your final answer. So instead of, well, it could be this or this, let me walk you through my thought process. You're saying, okay, great. I have an idea. I have an answer. One of the things that I'm emphasizing throughout these top 6 ideas is the sense of confidence, clarity, and structure as you're working through each of the pieces of the case. Finally, for number 7, a practice tip for us is that to incorporate all of these things and evaluate how you're doing with them before you go live and your whole future is on the line, make sure that you pre-record and review yourself. We've been doing this for years with our case interview coachees. The people that go through our sessions get a recording afterwards, and they're able to watch them or not watch them. But if you're doing it yourself, if you're going this alone, you absolutely need to watch yourself do a case interview and then go back through the top 6 things. Is your computer positioned in the right way? Did you recap clearly and strongly and ensure that the interviewer had the confidence that you would go through the case? Did you make sure that you over-numbered your structure and your structure retelling was incredibly clear? Did you make sure that in your math it was explicit each 4 parts of the math? For the creative, did you write and number each idea that you had as you had it? And for the closing, did you come up with a clear answer? You can go back through and evaluate all of those things. If you're in the process of preparing for a virtual case interview, join the MC team as we help you prepare with Black Belt, the world's only program that gives you a 10x opportunity to join one of the top 10 consulting firms. In addition, if you're preparing for an interactive case interview online where you're doing a PowerPoint presentation or whether you're working through some of the key issues simultaneously with multiple people in a group, you'll want to make sure that you're practicing in an effective and simulated environment. The online case interview is the same as an in-person case interview, but your delivery needs to differ because of the environment that you're in. And finally, if you have more questions about how to do online case interviews, we have hundreds of incredible resources built over 12 years of practicing in this exact format that are ready for you to utilize on our website at managementconsulted.com.